I think still that even in the absence of markers of protection, you have to look for those, let's say, incidences which are frequently enough. So, for example, in a daycare situation, but even in a country as we have, where so many people get vomiting disease in the winter, which you know that, well, 10% or 5% will suffer from that. So then you have an incidence which is enough to look for a study. For example, you can also do a study in winter depression in Sweden, because you know that 18% of the population north of the middle of the country will suffer from winter depression. So, yeah, that you have to look for that. And if there is absence for a protection marker, then you have to look for the real stuff.
But in this sentence, there is the reason why I believe that it seems more simple for probiotic to develop a protocol and to apply for an Article 14, because an Article 14 is clear, is the reduction of the risk to develop a specific pathological condition. For the pathological condition, we already have the biomarkers, so we can measure. But it's extremely difficult, this is my opinion, to apply for an Article 13. Because which is the physiological condition that we are going to improve or to support with our product? And that's exactly the vice versa of what we were thinking 2 years ago.
Just a reaction, is Article 14 not more related to chronic disease?
No. It's a reduction of risk of developing whatever the pathology. So, and the children, but this is another area of discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, and just to go through some of the EFSA statement, to maintain the natural intestinal microflora during travel, the travel diarrhea here, is unacceptable for EFSA, because the applicant has not defined natural intestinal microflora. So just to provide you, and then the applicant to improve the general immunity by maintaining the microbial balance. Improving general immunity and biological mechanism have not been sufficiently defined. Unacceptable. This is interesting because this is acceptable. And so means to protect the alimentary system against enteric pathogens. And the alimentary system has been retained as well-defined by EFSA. And also, they conclude that to reduce the of pathogenic organisms is beneficial, or could be beneficial. And so they accepted this. To reduce gastrointestinal discomfort may improve quality of life, and so this is acceptable. This is quite interesting because EFSA is doing a translation in the last opinions that I am really doubtful that they are really allowed to do, because they start with an Article 13 claim, digestive health, intestinal flora, and gut function. They have tried not to, let's say, put a negative statement immediately, and so they have translated in this way. The panel assume that the claimed effect refers to aspect of normalize, promotes bowel movement activity regularity. In this case, it could be acceptable, but when they translate from restoring the microbial balance into reducing the presence of pathogens, do we agree that it is a good translation, or there is something lost in translation? That's, for me, it's a problem. Just to conclude, I feel that to show a probiotic effect is possible, but we need the biomarkers, that's the problem. We need RCT trials, and we need from EFSA guidelines. Otherwise, possibly, the opportunity to discuss at least the health relationship, the second step, just to be sure that we are not going to waste your money. However, we have to be extremely careful because this is a very difficult area, and I would like to provide you with an example. So I think if you need, you will really rely on parachute, but parachute have some problem because the use of parachute is not evidence-based because they lack double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. This was published in the British Medical Journal in 2003. And so the author will really suggest to the advocates of evidence-based medicine to be enrolled in a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial just to really prove in a crossover trial the efficacy of parachute. I don't know if we have to invite the NDA panel members to go in this kind of trial, but this is the situation. Thanks.
Okay, so now we move to healthy people.
With the parachute.
With parachutes. And how could we use these examples to come up with a couple of recommendations? I see Esmond sitting in the back. He, of course, has a very difficult task to come up with the conclusions of today. It's not the intention to help him, but I think it would be very good to having in this audience a couple of recommendations that we can use, also to bring further our own research, to come up with what also was suggested, good applications for research grants, because definitely that's necessary. But I think it's also very important to come up with recommendations for industry. What should be the pathways that we have to follow to come up with claims that are acceptable? So who could I invite to start off with a first recommendation? Okay. Discussion with DG Sanko. You have that one, Espen?
I would like to add something to that recommendation. I think I've been previously quite successful in when I had a problem with a content issue with regulatory authorities, just in other ways. I tried to lift it to a political issue because you just go against barriers with a content issue if you have this sort of. And I think we have several points, easy points. For example, we would like to have that you could have some discussion if something is rejected, that you can have an appeal, this sort of things. I think there is a discussion about public health benefit versus individual consumer benefit. And I think politicians, especially European politicians, would be quite positive to such an open discussion, and also because they look, for example, if you have an agent which decreases blood pressure for 2 or 3 millimeters mercury, they can see the public health perspective of that. And they would probably be very negative if that information would be withheld to the population. So I think they have another way of looking to the problem. And if they ask questions to the European Commission, and that will be, of course, linked to Sanko, I think you can get something in movement. So my recommendation would be try to lift it to a political issue, but not do it in an offensive way, not at all. But organize a hearing, for example. We have done this in Sweden. Just organize a hearing on it, and then you get the politicians there, and you have the possibility to discuss, to present your points and to discuss it with the politicians. Try to identify key politicians in this area and talk with them.